Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, eMenu Choice Point of Sale, and Clark Food Service and Equipment. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. During 3 decades in the hospitality industry, I focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By creating hospitality with a purpose, by bringing the customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Joining me today on Tips from Trestle is David Hopkins. David is a recognized leader, facilitator, and speaker in the areas of leadership development, sales and marketing, culture, and customer experience. He grew up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and relocated to Florida as a young adult, beginning his career at the happiest place on earth, Walt Disney World. After spending many hours singing and dancing with his favorite characters, he decided to stop goofing around and worked his way into management, gaining experience in both resort and theme park operations. David then decided to use his leadership expertise to assist healthcare organizations. There, he rose to executive roles supporting areas such as acute care hospital operations, clinical education, and large physician practices. David, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to get into talking about why you're here. But first, I kind of like to let everybody, learn a little bit more about our guests. And so, we connected through the Bridge the Gap ambassador group the last couple of years. And that's been, I tell everybody that's been a great experience. And you get to meet really great people like yourself, and kind of learning about what you were doing and hearing your stories, being kind of boots on the ground in senior living was really great. But knowing now what you're doing, I'd like you to kind of tell us a little bit, how did you transition from Disney to senior living and how did you get to where we're at today?
Yeah. So after leaving Disney after 9/11, I hadn't gone to school or college at that time. And so I went back and focused on my degree and I got a health information management degree. And so that's kind of like the medical records. And I could talk clinical and I could talk business and kind of the intermix of both. And that really provided some great opportunities for me in going into hospitals and things like that. And that's really where I found my passion for leadership. Having come from Disney and led large teams, I really felt like I could add things to healthcare that were not being done. And that was really impactful for me. I had a lot of great experiences, a lot of great teams to build, mentor, shape, drive through some tough processes and stuff like that. And I was complaining, quite honestly, to one of my mentors that I had to drive into work every day. And it was like an hour commute and an hour home. And he got mad at me and he slammed down his coffee and he said, either live where you work or work where you live and don't call me till you figure it out. I'm like, crap. So I'm sitting there all alone with spilled coffee on the Starbucks table. And I'm just like, now what do I do? I'm like, well, I guess I got to figure this out. And so I started looking in my city that, what's available in healthcare and where could I translate some of these acute care hospital, large physician practice knowledge and bring that in. And I found senior living. And I looked at the job posting and I said, no way in hell. And the reason for that was I'd already lived the family journey 5 times.
Oh,
My
wow.
dad most recently was in a assisted living care community. I got the call Friday night. They're sending him out. Something's wrong with meds. Like, great. I know he's going to sit in the ER for 2 hours. Call me. My phone's right beside my bed. Woke up the next morning and I called the hospital because I hadn't heard anything overnight. And when I talked to them, they said, Mr. Hopkins, where have you been? We've been trying you all night. Like I'm literally my phone sitting right beside my bed. Like I was waiting for this call. It was on Audible.
Yeah.
And community switched two of my numbers on myself.
Oh no.
And my dad was on a ventilator. And then that next Wednesday after that, I had to remove his life support. And I'm like, there is no way I want part of senior living. And my wife said, well, maybe that's going to make you a better empathizer.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, dang it. I hate when she's right like that. So I applied, and unbeknownst to me, I had emailed there was a small community, about 30 locations in the Southeast. And I emailed one of the owners on LinkedIn and I said, not sure if you consider me. Here's my background. I live, like 9 minutes from the community. This sounds like it could be a good fit. Not sure. Let me see. And sent off the email. So got a response that weekend, went in and interviewed on that Monday, got hired on that Wednesday. And my first career into senior living lasted 4 years in the first community. It took me a while to figure out how the whole situation, game playing,
Yeah.
training, all that fun stuff. And so then have been off and running ever since at this point in time and making some magic in senior living.
Yeah. And so when you think about that transition, right, from, spending all that time in Disney, going into those other healthcare operations, and then transitioning to senior living, what do you think are some opportunities for improving leadership in senior living? This is something that, for me, I've always felt like we don't do as good a job as we could in setting up senior living leaders to be successful. And so you lived it, the transition. What are some of the things that you've seen as those opportunities?
Yeah. So I will tell you, in talking with other EDs, it's trial by fire, right? So
Yeah.
there's no book that encompasses everything you're ever going to experience in senior living. And we don't do a good job of training our leaders. We have some associations that are starting to step up, but leadership's never taught. Like if you're a great cook, you're going to be a great executive chef. And those are two completely different
Right.
jobs. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't worry about the bottom line of how much expenses and PPD for each, a resident that you've got to manage for, and how do I strategize that for the entire month if I buy filet for this one special event. I mean, that's just a whole different skill set.
Yeah. Exactly.
We expect them to be great because you're a great cook. Same
Yeah.
with our leaders, right?
You
You're a
know,
great nurse, caring, compassionate. Well, you could do schedules. Those two are completely different.
Yeah. No, I think you make a great point, right? From my experience, dealing with various different corporate operators is that we're going to spend a lot of time, effort, and resources to train you how to do our systems really well. But we don't really get into some of the other soft skills that come in around leadership. And I think that's something that, you're trying to do with your book and some of the things that you've probably experienced as well.
Absolutely. The other thing I saw in senior living was it's competition, like cutthroat. I entered back in about 2014, and there were four communities in my small city area. And the first thing I did was try to build partnerships with them. And, I took all three of the other EDs out to breakfast, and you would have thought like we were negotiating World War II Armistice Treaty because they were like on guard, ready to
Yeah.
attack. Like, why did you bring us here? I'm like, look, I'm not going to steal somebody from you, and I'm not going to steal one of your employees. And if that they come to me, I'm going to pick up the phone and have a conversation. Quick story on that was I had a guy looking in my community, and he was coming from another community because he didn't like the meatballs. So I pick up the phone, I called the executive director, and I said, hey, this guy's here looking, and he wants to get meatballs. He said something about the meatballs are not right. She's like, oh my God, we ordered them. They're coming in this week. I'm like, well, get these guys meatballs so you can keep them in your building. She's like, why are you calling me? I said, "'Cause
Yeah.
this is more important for him to have what he needs, be secure in a location
Yeah.
rather than him jump to me and then jump to somebody else. That's not good for him." And that started breeding the trust and the development, which really I was proud of.
Yeah, I think you're right. It always felt to me like, when I think about trying to work with peers before I got into consulting, it always felt like everybody's trying to guard their state secrets. And I'm like, guys, we don't have secrets. I mean, there you can go out to any you can just start Googling things, right? Like, look at how chain restaurants do things, how hotels do things. They're copycatting all of the great stuff. Very rarely do you see something that's like crazy over the top innovative. So it's like if we all work together, we can probably all be better, right? We can become better, in the industry, we can become better representatives and we could better support residents. And, the demographics that are coming our way, there's going to be plenty of them to serve. So I don't
Right.
think that's going to be an issue. So,
Mhm. Completely agree.
one of the things that I think is kind of important to talk about when we think about improving leadership in senior living, and you mentioned this as we were prepping, we're expected to be experts in everything, especially at that like top level, like department or community leadership. And w- w- how do you think that impacts like longevity and how people view our industry and how hard it is to keep people in the industry? Today, I want to tell you about one of Trustful's senior living partners, Belt. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care, from independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs. Belter specializes in right sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer focused approach is built on a foundation, of collaboration, and decades of industry experience. So, thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs.
It's overwhelming. I mean, especially the new executive director who comes out and you're expected to know all this stuff. And it's overwhelming. And I think you're starting to see that now where people could kind of hold it together for a while. But, you know, I think I saw a statistic the other day. The average executive director lasts about a year and a half to 2 years at a building. And that's
Months, yeah.
crazy to think your whole ship's captain is changing over at that time every 2 years. Like you're never going to gain that traction and that momentum. And you've got to allow leaders to lead. And a good leader knows they don't know everything, right? In my mentor, who, it happened to be Lee Cockrell, he was the number two guy at Walt Disney World, executive vice president. So everything from operations reported to Lee. He tells a story. He went into the military, he worked for Marriott, he worked hard and worked his way up, but he did not have a college degree. His vice president of engineering has a PhD in three different engineering fields. And he reported to Lee. And
Yeah.
Lee's like, my responsibility isn't to know engineering. My responsibility is to get the roadblocks out of his way so he can do his job and impart his expertise. And we've
Yeah.
we've missed that in senior living, especially. We find the executive director is that gap filler. Oh, you're on vacation, you're going to be a cook for a week. Oh, she's on vacation, you're going to be passing meds for a week. Oh, the activities director is out, you're going to be planning and running all the activities for when it's not. It needs to be a true leadership position where it helps everybody and engages. Now, listen, I've cooked everything or tried to cook some things. I had a great experience. My cook called out for breakfast one morning. The lady ordered poached eggs. I watched a YouTube video. I tried to poach an egg. 6 eggs later, I walk out and I looked at the lady and I said, listen, you ordered poached eggs? And she said, yes. And I said, they're coming out either fried, over easy, or scrambled. So which way do you want it? She's like, but I ordered poached. I'm like, that's great. You can order it all day, but it's not coming out of the kitchen that way because I don't have that expertise to do it.
It's so funny because I hear operators will talk about we need to set up our executive directors to be the CEOs of their communities, right? But everything that you just described and everything that have experienced with the way executive directors are found and hired and trained is the exact opposite of that, right? It's like hey, you need to know your numbers, you need to know this, you need to understand this, but they don't get any of the others. And so it, I'm guessing that that's why we're talking today about why you wrote a book about leadership. And so, can you tell us a little bit about the book and kind of what inspired it being written?
So the book's called Kazoo Leadership: Five Notable Steps to Becoming a Great Leader. And it's an easy read. It takes you less than an hour to read it. And that was intentional. Some people were like, oh, why'd you write such a short book? It's like a pamphlet. That's not the case. As an executive director, I love to read, I love to get knowledge, but all the great big books out there that are, leadership principles and all this stuff, they're like 250, 275 pages, right? And, you know, I love Jim Collins, like totally idolize Good to Great.
Hmm.
The book is 238 pages, and everybody has the same concept when they talk about the book. With the right people in the right seats on the bus.
Yep.
Going from bad to good is hard. Going from good to great is even harder. So the other 237 pages, I'm not sure what we're doing.
No, you're right. It's funny you bring up that exact book because I mean, I remember reading it shortly after it came out. But the reason I was able to get all the way through it is I happened to be on an 8-hour road trip from Kansas City to Denver. And this was before, you had like iPhones and all of that. And so literally my choices were to kind of stare at the scenery or maybe read a book. And so I read the book. And so I was able to get all the way through it, be able to ingest it. I think your point about a short book makes sense too, because attention spans now are just way shorter. I know even myself, I've kind of transitioned to this. I need it in the short clips or, 10 or 15 minutes or less. And so being able to sit down with the short book makes a ton of sense. And so, but when you think about the elements of what's in your book, how do you feel like what you talk about from leadership can be a little bit different and how this book can impact leaders in senior living?
Yeah. So I compare good leading to playing a kazoo. And, we've all played kazoos at a birthday party when we were like 5 or 6. It's a lot of fun. I'll do keynote addresses and I'll hand out kazoos to the entire audience. And you see 300 people trying to figure out how to play a kazoo from, 40 plus years ago. And they're like, and it's funny because you can always tell who's who in the audience, right? The quality assurance nurse automatically goes, it's broken, doesn't work. I'm like, you're with the quality department, aren't you? No, like, yeah, she is. Right. But we haven't taught them the right way of doing something. And that's what I equate that to. So it's super easy. Anybody can lead. We all do it on a daily basis. We just got to get a little bit more honed in on our skills to say, if we follow these 5 steps, we're going to be a successful leader. Because most of the time, and what we've talked about even in the beginning here, is we haven't had training. We weren't told what to do. Oh, but this spreadsheet's super important. So make sure you do this one correctly, right? Because
Yeah.
this is to corporate, or this is the one that the owners look at. And we want them to know that we know what we're doing. Well, how about we know what we're doing? And that's going to show across the community as opposed to in a spreadsheet. Right. And
Yeah.
so focusing leaders in on just 5 easy steps, because again, as you said, our attention spans are going lower and lower. I mean, YouTube went to shorts. You
Yeah.
find YouTube videos were like 2 minutes are now long, right? You got to have it in under 30 seconds.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because what you're saying about like, trying to make EDs experts in everything, having them have all of these skills, it's just not possible, right? And so how do we pour into them in a way that allows them to grow and to develop and be successful and really tap into that inherent leadership that we hope they bring to the table in their role? I think it's so important. And so um, when you think about how to condense leadership into, like, your five-step process, ho what was that process like for you? Because obviously, we to condense things down like that is it can be difficult. And so, how did you look at leadership differently to get to that point?
A Navigator is the largest full service TPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solution. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
So I will tell you, I was very fortunate that I was trained at Disney, right? So Disney, love them or hate them, they've got leadership dialed in. When I was selected to become a leader, and this has changed over the years because several years ago, and we went through a process called Apple Core Training because we were the core of the app. And Disney is all about the metaphors and making sure you
Yeah.
understand it, not only in business, but also in real life. And I was trained for 6 months. Like I had homework. We had a classroom day, a full day for 8 hours that we were in a classroom with teachers and experienced leaders. I had to shadow and work in different departments, whether it was, food and beverage, quick service, custodial, ride operations. So that when I truly became a leader and was cut loose, I was ready to lead. And it didn't matter what department I was in, what I needed to do, but they truly prepared you in that sense to encounter a ton of situations, be able to handle those, guess first. You have your priorities that you were managing through, and that allowed you to be a successful leader. Disney has a great step program, and the first priority is always safety. And that means that if a cashier is walking across the park and she has a full cash drawer, $5,000 in it, and she sees a little boy climbing up on the railing of a bridge, she can drop that tray, run over and get that boy down. And if she walks back and that tray is completely empty, it's okay. You know why? Because that's their number one priority. Safety is more important than that money. Now, if I said that in senior living, I have 90% of the regional directors going, "Oh my God, don't do that."
Yeah. That prioritization is such a key thing, right? Because I think that's where, when you think about how do you develop a leader and how do you get them to understand, we can only put so much into a day. We can only put so much into our weeks. And so, I'm learning that as a new business owner, right? I'm 2 years in, but I still learn that if I think about the priorities and what's the most important, uh, sometimes I wind up focusing on the wrong things if I don't do that. And so, prioritizing what's important, what's the value add, I think is such a great takeaway. So,
Yeah.
as we kind of wrap up here, David, I always ask my guests, when you think about everything that we've talked about, you think about everything that's in your book, what would be the one big takeaway that you'd want our listeners to take from this conversation and why your book would be valuable for them to get into?
There's the book is a great reminder that everybody's a leader and we all have power with our words. As a young kid in 10th grade, I had a teacher tell me I was going to pretty much amount to nothing but pushing a button to run a car through a car wash. And that was impactful. And that was probably not the way he intended it, but it was something that stuck with me and it took a lot to overcome. And we as leaders have impact every day, whether it's with our residents, whether it's with our staff and our employees, whether it's with our corporate people, because sometimes they're getting beat down too. And you just need to have that somebody on your side. Our words are powerful. The way we lead is powerful. And we all have a huge responsibility in leading ourselves and leading others. And you can learn that in Kazoo Leadership.
Awesome. Well, David, thanks so much for being here. As we wrap up, how can listeners contact you or connect with you? How can they get a hold of your book so they can spend that hour this Saturday reading it on
Love
all
it.
of that good stuff?
Yeah. So the book's available on Amazon, Kindle edition. It's $9.99. It's real cheap. So, affordable for everybody. Makes a great stocking stuffer if you're looking for a nice Christmas present. You
Yes.
can also connect with me on LinkedIn, David S. Hopkins, and the website is kazooleadership.com. And that's in the book as well. So I would look forward to connecting with you and hearing your stories.
Perfect. David, great conversation. I'm glad we were able to do this. Looking forward to hearing more about how the book sales go when we connect in the future. So thanks again for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate it. As always, your podcasts are so amazing. I look forward to them coming out.
Thanks, sir. So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.